notes to this week's edition of the Louisiana Heart Beats Show. I'm host Dennis Ward, and today in the studio we have a very honored to have a very special guest, Hollywood actress, stunt performer, and coordinator in film and television, U.S. and world champion coach, and co-author of 2 nonfiction books, Leigh Hennessy Robson. Welcome, Leigh.
Thank you.
Well, you've had an incredible life. You have an incredible resume, and let's just begin with your early life.
Okay.
And you were born and raised in Lafayette, Louisiana, and tell our viewers how your family shaped a large part of your later life.
Well, they've shaped starting very young, actually, and I was born in Monroe.
I'm sorry.
And that's okay. When I was 6 months old, moved here, so technically, basically all my life was here. But my father worked at the university. He was a physical education professor.
Okay.
But his claim to fame is he was a trampoline coach. And he was, at the time that I always could remember, he was the U.S. national coach. So, one of the best in the world. And so I just had always been around high-level athletics, high-level sports, just since I was a child. So it's just something that was just, seemed like a very normal way for a child to grow up.
And we were talking earlier, you were just kind of unaware that you were living this high level of sports activity, and the class of athleticism was off the charts, really, from the way you talked.
Well, like I said, it was just what you do. I mean, that when I started to maybe realize what was going on around me, what age that would be, 4 or 5, whatever. Every day was around world champions. If you're from Lafayette, you would know the name Wayne Miller and Jimmy Young and Donald Waters and Frank Schmitz. These are names of people who were the best in the world at the time right here in Lafayette.
Wow.
And so after kindergarten, which I went to school at Hamilton, right down the street here, I would go to the gym and spend the rest of my afternoons with my dad and his world-class athletes while they're training, and I'd play on the trampoline a little bit, what little children do, and it was just always what I was around.
Wow. Well, it certainly shaped what the next part we're going to take. You hold the Guinness World Record for winning the most trampoline championships and are considered one of the best female athletes in trampoline in U.S. history. That's amazing.
I had a long career.
Well, and could you talk about the competitions and what some of the highlights were of that world?
Yeah, well, one of the things, there's nothing more overwhelming than standing on a podium, winning a medal. For me, it could have been first or third. As long as I was on the podium, it's an overwhelming experience. That is basically why you train, is to have that few moments of achievement, the recognition for your achievement. But at the end of the day, one of the best things that sports gave me was the opportunity to travel around the world and make friends in countries far and wide. And I've remained friends with a lot of those people. And I feel so fortunate to have had that opportunity.
Well, maybe we could have the trampoline set of photos then. So, yeah, the trampoline is part of gymnastic and has been an Olympic sport since the 2000s Olympics in Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
And you were telling me earlier that the sport really hasn't changed that much? And
Well, since it's become an Olympic sport, I mean, it's changed dramatically since my father was coaching. I mean, there's major differences in equipment and it's grown. A number of things have changed, but from the 2000 games in Sydney to the games now, some rule changes have been put in effect, but the skill level of the gymnasts is fairly similar now as it was in 2000. I think that, I mean, it's gotten to where I just don't know how they can get any stronger. I really don't. I mean, it's the men do, there's 10 skills to routine. They all must be different, okay? So some of the men are doing routines that have 4, 5, 6 triple somersaults in them.
Wow.
With twists and variations, what makes them different. And there's just so far that the body can be pushed. So it's extraordinary in the year 2000, just as extraordinary as it is now.
Could we have the Egyptian trampoline picture? That's one of my favorites. Tell the viewers about this photo. I think it's just incredible.
This photo was taken in Egypt. I'm sure that's pretty obvious. Yeah. And this was, and I have to tell people all the time, this was taken before Photoshop. And so this is the photographer, this is what he saw. There's no touch-ups to it, there's no changing to it. So what happened was, I don't remember the exact year, but a national team of gymnasts went to Egypt to promote the sport. And we did demonstrations all over, we did clinics, we did all kinds of things to get the Egyptians to start a trampoline team. But one day we went out to the pyramids just to take photos, and we also had permission to climb up the smallest of the 3 pyramids. So we climbed the pyramid, the little one, that day as well, and we just drove around and put the trampoline in different settings, where the photographer picked the settings. We had a team photographer with us, and he chose that setting, and I was just jumping, and he got that shot.
I love it. I love it.
They make there's a poster made out of it. Yeah.
Really, I imagine.
Yeah.
Well, one of the trampoline events now is synchronized.
Yes.
Have you done synchronized?
Oh yeah.
Partnered?
Oh yeah, that was one of my favorite events.
Yeah.
That was an event since about 1960. Well, it might have even been in the very first World Championships. It might have been. It was either in the first one or the second one, but it's been around that long. So that would be in the the 60s. But in 1976, I placed second in the World Championships and synchronized. My synchro partner was a young gymnast from Memphis named Ann Thompson, and we were only second by 1/10 of a point.
Oh my God!
I know. We were beat by the Russians. Damn it!
Oh, those Russians!
Those Russians.
Well, then your life. Well, you've been doing now in the sports of trampoline. What are you doing now?
Well, I am doing a lot of different things, but we moved back to Lafayette, and I'm still working in the film business. I'm still available. Yes, I'm still available to work. And my husband and I wrote a couple of books, and I have some other projects coming up. I'm sort of now at that stage of my life where I'm sort of picking and choosing things to do, which I'm very grateful for. Yeah.
Well, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
In what year you got your master's degree in communication from UL, and you went to work for Congressman Jimmy Hayes in Washington. That is quite a switch. Tell me how that happened.
Yes, that was kind of a switch. Well, I'd finished my master's degree program, and I had an injury, and I wasn't competing. I had retired. Of course, I did start competing again later in life, but at that time I'd pretty much retired from competing. And I remember actually in the hospital with my leg up in the air getting a phone call from Congressman Hayes' office that they had recommended me. He had just been elected, and he was looking for local people to work in his office in Washington, D.C. And so the university had referred me, and I don't remember who referred me, but he interviewed me, and I thought it was exciting. I said, cool. So when he hired me, I drove on up.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, how were those years? Did you like politics? Was that rewarding?
I loved politics. I really do. And I loved it then. But it was a learning curve that was a little bit dramatic for me, because I had been in school all my life or coaching, working with kids, and it was just a massive switch, and of course in a different part of the country. Now I'd traveled a lot, so it wasn't the culture shock, but it was a professional shock. Had to stay sitting at a desk for hours and working out of an office was out of my realm of reality. So I didn't last long.
These were the late 80s or early 90s?
Early 90s, yes.
Early 90s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we went from H.W. Bush to...
Right. I was at... It's ironic that today is H.W. Bush's funeral. I was at his inauguration.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's
yep,
amazing.
1,000 points of lights, everything.
1988.
It was 88? Okay. It was 1988.
Wow.
Wow.
No, you're right, 89.
Yeah, 89.
January 89.
I was there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, then your life took another dramatic turn too. Now you're an actress, a stunt performer,
right.
coordinator.
Right. Yes. Like I said, as much as I loved politics, and I would never ever trade those few years that I was in Washington for the world. It was a great experience, a learning experience, but I just needed to move. I needed to move. I mean, not physically, I meant physically move, not move my house. I needed the job that was active.
Yeah.
And I needed to get out of an office environment. And I just did an insanely crazy thing, and I just sold everything I owned, which wasn't much. I didn't own a car because they have Subway there. And I bought this old jalopy for $600, and I drove to Los Angeles, and I knew 3 people there.
Oh, wow.
And from those 3 people...
That's courageous.
It was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. And from those 3 people, I just, grew a support system, or, friends, and met people, and started training again. With a coach out in California, and because of the training, I was recommended to go on a casting call they needed some girls to jump on trampoline for a Ralph Lauren ad, Polo, and I went and got cast, and I did the job, and I was sold at that point. This is what I want to do, so I pursued it at that point. I don't remember what year that was. I may have sent you one of the photos, I don't remember, but photo taken by Bruce Weber.
Yeah, we had that.
Okay, so that was my very first job in as a member of the Screen Actors Guild.
I wanted to talk about, this is 1997 with Demi Moore.
Mm-hmm.
G.I. Jane is the film.
Yeah.
Very critically applauded film.
Yeah, yes.
And you had many active scenes in this.
Right. I worked on that from day one to the day we wrapped. So there was a lot of scenes for me in that movie.
I can't really tell who's Demi Moore and who.
Oh, shucks.
But
she has the pointy head. Mine's shaped like a light bulb. That's how you can tell the difference.
Amazing. I mean, did they try with makeup to make you look
Oh, yeah.
so...
Well, This particular photo, you can see the blood and stuff. That's all makeup, obviously. But the makeup was mostly to not to make me look like her, but to mimic the scene. You know, like in that case, blood or dirt, or you know. And then of course I had to shave my head because that was what she opted to do. It would look kind of silly. The bald skull caps are a little bit too obvious, so it had to be realistic. And she went, you know, she wanted to shave her head that was a choice she made, so I had to make the same choice. I mean, I couldn't get the job if I said no, basically.
Yeah.
And they paid me extra for it. I mean, it was well worth a few months of humiliation. So that's where the makeup really was about. It was not to make me look like her, but
Okay.
I mean, part of the reason I got hired is because I could be, you know, at that era. I mean, not now, but at that time, you know, I was built like her, and same height and same weight and same, you know, dark hair and that kind of thing.
Well, you had a fight scene with Viggo Mortensen. Mike, tell us about that.
It might not surprise you, but he's a very intense actor. And I think there were a few moments that he forgot that I was a human being.
Good Lord.
But the scene started, if you remember the movie, the scene started in a little hut, and I'm sitting in a chair, or her character is sitting in a chair with her hands behind her back, and he was interrogating her, and she was not having it. She was not giving him the information because she was being trained not to do that. And he pushed her to the limits, as if you remember in the show. He was extremely intense, but extremely gracious. And following the whole scene, he's told me several times, you know, that I was a really good actress, and he had a really lovely scene with me. And it was, I think, from his heart. I don't think he was blowing smoke up. I felt like he was sincere. He's a lovely, lovely, lovely guy. But there was this one moment where he dunked me in water to make me think he was going to, you know, drown me, and then pulled me up and dunked in the water. And I think sometimes he forgot I was there. And thankfully, the handcuffs were breakaways, you know, so I had to break away and pull myself up a couple of times.
Oh my God.
Because I think he just was so into character.
Wow.
Yeah, but like I said, that's the reason why we had the breakaways, is so that I could make the call, you know, okay, stop, I need to come up. But a similar thing happened in The Guardian, where the actor I was working with was actually Kevin's stunt double, not Kevin Costner himself, but his stunt double was, we were swimming out off frame, and he had me in a chokehold, and I was like, I had to cut the scene a couple times because I was like breathing water up my nose. So sometimes sometimes actors just forget that they're in a make-believe world, and it's a real world.
Wow.
So sometimes.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you have been in 16, 17 feature films?
Oh, I have at least 100 credits to my name.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
And Sci-Fi Channel?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's funny enough, when I came back to Louisiana, it was after Hurricane Katrina. A logical place to move was New Orleans, and because I did The Guardian, and it was in Shreveport, but they started shooting in New Orleans, and then the hurricane hit, and they went to Shreveport. But because of the tax incentives here in the state, a lot of feature films were shooting here, and I'd gotten a lot of calls to work, which I had to turn down because I was working on The Guardian at the time. But I realized I could have just as lucrative a career here than in Los Angeles, and I wanted to be here. I wanted to be near my family. I wanted to be a part of the rebirth of New Orleans. We moved to New Orleans. Well, strangely enough, the first 4 or 5 jobs I got were here in Lafayette. So I was driving to Lafayette to work, but it was great. And I was doing stunt coordinating on those shows. With a local production company, which has since left Lafayette, but they were doing most sci-fi films.
Wow, wow. Well, I want to get to, you have authored 2 nonfiction books with your husband writer, Dr. Mark Robson. And the first is The Day of the Cajundome Mega Shelter. Getting back to you lived in Louisiana, and your late brother had this project unfinished. He suddenly died young. And you contacted the New York editor.
Actually, it was the local editor.
Local
it was
editor.
Acadian Publishing. I contacted him, Trent Andrews, and I suggested that that my husband and I finish my brother's book. I just wanted his legacy to move on. I didn't want this to just drop, or somebody that we don't know, pick up and start writing it. I wanted to be an homage to my brother. I wanted to honor his voice as best we could, which is a tremendous challenge. And he agreed. So Mark and I finished the book, and it was an eye-opening experience of what was happening here, and the heroes from Lafayette that pulled out all the stops to help their neighbors in need. So it was a heartwarming, it's a tremendous story that everybody in Lafayette should be very proud of.
You were telling me earlier that busloads of dialysis patients pulled up that had not had dialysis in over 3 days, and the crew was right there.
Yes.
And it turned into kind of a mini Superdome affair.
Yes, but it was very organized. It was very organized, so they were better prepared than the Superdome. The Superdome was just inundated, unprepared for what was happening. And at the Cajundome, they had a heads up. They had an idea that they were going to be called to do this. Greg Davis, who's the director, and Dr. Paul Lazar, and a few other important people were ready to go. They started off with having triage, and they knew they had a general idea of where these people were going to stay. The only problem is, traditionally, a shelter is only about 3 days, and this ended up being for 2 or 3 months. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So the second book you wrote again with Mark?
Yes, the second book is sort of General Russell Honoré, back to Katrina. He was the hero of Katrina, sort of brought in and got everybody together. He's become an expert on CNN and other places for climate change or environmental issues, but he's also has an opinion or a view of everything. He's a very successful general. He's been all over the world, and he knows how to command armies. So we wrote the book with the general, and it was pretty much a spin-off of the Cajundome because of the similarities in the Hurricane Katrina thread.
The title is Don't Get Stuck on Stupid.
Right.
I like that. That sounds like General Honoré.
Yeah, that's he was on camera in Lake Charles before Hurricane Rita, throwing that line out there on the national news, berating a journalist. And so that's his tagline, don't get stuck on stupid.
I feel like he's a man who commands common sense.
He does. He's brilliant. We've grown to be very, very big fans of his, and admire him greatly, and really, really enjoyed these few months that we spent with him to get his thoughts down on paper.
That's great. Well, I wanted to ask you just personally, I'm curious, here we have Katie Holmes, and you're obviously wearing a wig.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm doubling Helen Mirren in this. Yeah, okay, I'm doubling Helen Mirren in this shot. And the other girl, her name is Dinah Lupo. She was Katie Holmes' stunt double. She was also my roommate at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is in the makeup trailer.
And this is Teaching Mrs. Tingle.
Teaching
with
Mrs. Tingle. Yeah.
Helen Mirren.
Yeah.
The great Helen
The
Mirren.
great
I
Helen
love her.
Mirren. Yeah. She was really lovely to work with too. She was very charming and great to be around.
I bet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Leigh. I wish we would have had an hour to talk. Your life is so rich.
Oh,
and
thank you.
It was a pleasure interviewing you.
Thank you.
Maybe we can do part 2 one day.
One day.
Thanks again.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Gosh, we didn't.